Hello guys, I'm Pico. Today we're going to use Electron.js to build an always on top browser, which is a browser that always stays on top. Why? Well, it's because I'm tired of alt tabbing every time I want to Google something, check syntax. Always on top browsers can be super handy. Now let's talk about prerequisites. The first thing we're going to need is an IDE such as Visual Studio Code. The second prerequisite is node.js. You will not be able to build an Electron.js application without node.js installed on your PC. Let's make sure we have it. To do that, open a terminal. If you're working with VS Code, the shortcut for opening terminal is Control and backtick. To check if you have node, just type in node space and then flag V. V stands for version, and then hit enter. As you can see, this is the version I have. Now, if you didn't have node installed on your computer, what you'd see is an error. And if you see an error, then you better head on to Node's website and install Node. Just Google Node.js and you'll find the website, and then download it and you'd be good to go. The third prerequisite is npm. The good news is it comes with Node, so when you install Node, it's installed too at the same time. But let's double check that it's there before we start coding, because you can also uninstall it, so it's good to always double check. Now it's time to actually start creating our application. So let's create a new folder where our app will live. Let's call it Super Browser. And now let's open it in Visual Studio Code. You can just drag it. To create our Electron app, we're going to use Electron Forge. And I would like to use it with the Vite plugin. There's actually a template already available on Electron Forge's website that has the Vite plugin included. So we're just going to copy it and paste it in our terminal. How about we change the app name? Let's call it something more personal and more exciting. Like, how about my super browser? All right, and then we'll hit enter and wait a few seconds. All right, now everything looks ready. Let's cd into the root directory and then type in npm start to start the application. And there it is. Our app is running the way it's supposed to be. Let's head into our source folder and open main.js. The first thing we want to do is make sure that our window always stays on top. It's nice to do that early because it will make our coding experience much more convenient, as we'll see the changes we're making while making them. To do that, type in main window dot set always on top, and we'll set that to true, and here we'll type in screen. Another thing I would like us to do before we start our app and see the changes we've made is to remove this toolbar or menu bar, because we won't be actually needing it. Right, so over here within the function where we're creating the main window, we want to type autoHideMenuBar, and then we'll set that to true. And that's it. And then we can save. And then now we need to restart our application to see if the changes we've made were successful. To do that, just hit Control C. To terminate batch job, just answer with Y, and then type in npm start and hit enter all over again. That will restart your application. Okay, and here we are. As you can see, there's no menu bar. Now let's see what happens if we click away. Oh, it stays on top. Cool. All right, first mission accomplished. Excellent. How about we create our UI? We start with creating our UI. So we've used Vite as the template, which means we should have hot reloading. So we should see changes to HTML and CSS as we're making them. Let's see if that is true. Okay, so we can erase everything. Just make sure to not erase the script part, because that's what links our HTML file to the renderer file. And later we're going to be adding some code to make our UI interactive. All right, so now we have an empty window. We're going to start creating the browser tools right away. But first, let's change this title. How about we change it to always on top. All right. Now let's move into the body tag and start creating our browser tools. First thing we want to do is create a div where our browser tools will live. Let's give it the ID browser tools. It's always a good idea to give descriptive IDs. Right, browser tools. Okay, and now we're going to style it with display flex. We're giving it display flex because we want our elements to stay next to each other. And since we want it to occupy the entire width of the screen, we're going to set the width to 100 VW. Okay, now let's create a child div, which is going to hold our buttons. It's going to be our button container. So let's give it the ID button container. And now let's start creating our buttons. The first button will be the back button. So let's give it the ID back button. And then we'll create a forward button. So let's give it the ID forward button. And then we'll create a reload button. ID reload button. Okay. And then let's make a search button with the ID search button. And finally, let's create the new window button with the ID new window button. Okay, and now let's create another div where we are going to have our input area where we're going to input our URL. So let's create a form. Within the form, let's add in the input area. Let's add in the attribute required. The required attribute makes sure that the input cannot be submitted without the user writing something in the input area. Let's add a submit button and give it the ID go. Okay, now it's time to add in the symbols for the back button, forward button, reload button, search button, and new window button. The way we're going to do this is we're going to use Google to find HTML entities of these buttons. So let's just do that. So the first one we want is back symbol. We want a symbol that looks fitting for the back button. So let's write back symbol HTML and see what comes up. All right. Okay, this looks cool. Right, so let's copy the HTML entity. All right, we're going to also use this symbol for the forward button. Okay, it's working. Wonderful. All right, and then we need a reload button. Okay, let's check this the Stack Overflow thread and see if we can find HTML entity code. All right, there it is. We can copy this. Yes, it looks great. Okay, and now we need a symbol for the search button. We're gonna use Stack Overflow again. Perfect. Okay, and for the new window button, we could just use a plus sign. Looks good. All right, next up, we're going to add some CSS. Let's open our index.css file to the side. All right, awesome. So we haven't edited anything in the CSS file yet, so let's remove the code that we don't need. Let's remove everything except for the font family. Awesome. Okay, and now let's change the background color to black. Oops. Yeah, black. All right, now let's edit the URL input area. To do that, let's actually assign an ID to it. So how about ID? How about URL input? Okay. So now let's add some styles to it. Let's try changing the width to make it a bit bigger. How about trying out 75 VW? That is bigger. Okay, but now our buttons look super funny. So maybe we could change the display on our button container to see if that would fix it. Button container, let's try display contents. Oh, cool. Okay, now flex 1. Right, and let's add some padding to the bottom. How about 5 pixels? How about we make the background color something dark, not black, a bit lighter, like darkish color. Yeah, I like that. Okay, and now if we type, the text is black, so let's change that. Let's make the color white. Let's change the border. Let's give it 2 pixel thickness and make it solid. And how about we try a gray color? Let's change that. I think that looks alright, right? Kinda. It's not bad, I think. Okay, and let's add a border radius to round it up a bit. Let's make it 5%. Alright. Okay, and this go button, let's make it so that if the screen size is small, then this go button just disappears. Let's add a media query. Max width 800 pixels. Hashtag go. Display none. Also, let's add some styling to all of our buttons. Okay, button, make the cursor pointer. And let's change the background color to something dark. Let's first try out gray and then just edit it. Choose whatever color you want. Now let's make our symbols white. And change the border radius, round it up a bit, about 20%. I think that looks better. Alright, so right now we have something that looks like a browser, but it actually doesn't have the functionality of a browser. We just have UI, and we don't even have a place to load a web page yet. And that's what we're going to fix right now. In order to load a web page, we could use something called a webview tag, which comes included with Electron. However, you're gonna need to enable it. So let's get to that. Let's enable our webview tag. Step 1 to enable the webview tag is to head to main.js and go to the createWindow function, and then find web preferences and add webview tag true. Let's add it to our HTML file at the bottom, right above the script tag, webview. VS Code doesn't recognize it, so it stays red, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean that we've made a mistake. Let's give it ID webview. Alright, so now we have a window that resembles a browser, and we have a place where we can show a web page. Now it's time to add functionality. So let's head on to our Renderer.js file. Let's delete all of this, and let's remove the console.log message as well. Okay, now let's bring our HTML file into view, because right now we're just going to create variables in our JS file of all the elements we have here, so we can add some interactivity. So first thing, let's start with our buttons. So const back button equals document dot get element by ID and back button. Right, const forward button, same thing, document dot get element by ID forward button, and then const reload button equals document dot get element by ID reload button, const search button equals document dot get element by ID, and then search button, const new window button equals document dot get element by ID new window button, and then const go button equals document dot get element by ID. And okay, so those are the buttons. Okay, now let's get the URL field. So const URL input field equals document.getElementById. That's URL input. Okay, and the web view. So const web view equals document.getElementById, and the ID is also web view. Oh, looks like I've made a typo. This is supposed to be a capital F as per JavaScript's naming convention. Okay, now let's add an event listener on URL input field. This event listener will detect when the user hits enter. Event listener on key down, and then event. We'll add a conditional. If event dot key equals enter, event dot prevent default. Doing this is important as we don't want the default form submission behavior. So it's important to remember to prevent default. Okay, now let's create a function that will handle URL input and would also change the web view. Function handle URL. First thing we want is we want to capture the input in the input field. Const input URL equals URL input field dot value. Okay, so the next thing we must do is find a way to display the URL typed into our input field in the web view. In order to do that, we can use the source attribute. It's actually quite simple to use, as you can see. All we gotta do is just tell it the URL we want. Webview.source equals input.url. All right, now let's add an handle URL to our event listener function. So now when a user types in a valid URL and hits enter, it's supposed to navigate to that page. Let's see if it works. Okay. Oh, it does work. Excellent. But there's obviously a problem that the web view is not the height of the screen. It's very small. We should try to fix that. Let's head to index.css. Let's add styling to the web view and see if we can make it take the whole height of the screen. Web view height. Let's make it 100 VH, and it works. That's great. Right now, our browser works. However, if we want to use it, every time we have to write https:// or http:// in order for it to work properly. And that's a bit inconvenient. Let's add a functionality to our handle URL application that would allow us to just type in the URL without the https:// part. So let's find our function handle URL in our Renderer.js file. Let's initialize a mutable variable that will hold our URL string. So let URL equals and then empty string. this will be equal to URL. Okay. We first want to make sure that our URL has HTTP, and if it doesn't, we want to add it. So we'll write a conditional. So, if input URL starts with HTTP or input.url starts with HTTPS : then URL equals input URL. So basically that means if the input URL is formatted correctly, do not change anything. Let's add in an else statement. Else URL equals HTTP : plus input URL. Finally, we have the webview.source equals URL. Let's test our app to see if our changes work. Let's type in let's try tomatoes.com and see if there's a website called tomatoes.com and whether it will work. Yes, it does work. So far we can type in a URL, hit enter, and the URL will show in our web view. Let's make the go button work as well. Go button .addEventListener, click event. Don't forget to prevent default. And we just add in the function handle URL. That's it. And our go button should work. Let's try it out. Okay, let's type in www.go.com. I don't know what will show up. And let's hit go. Cool, so now our go button works. All right, right now we want to add functionality to our search button as well. Right now we have the button, but it doesn't do anything. So let's write some code to actually get it to go to google.com. First, let's create a global mutable variable for the URL. Let's initiate it to an empty string. Let's add an event listener to our search button. So on click, set the URL value to Google's URL. And also we want our URL input field to reflect the URL we're on. In order to do that, we're going to set the value of the URL input field to the URL. So URL input field dot value equals URL. And now in order to actually show the page, we have to use WebView's source attribute and set it to the URL. Let's see if we were successful. Okay, let's hit the search button and it works. However, there are still some issues with our application. For example, let's use Google. Let's search for anything. Let's search for cute cats. All right, as you can see, the URL stays the same. It doesn't change, and that's not how browsers should work. So let's fix that. Luckily, there is a way to detect when there is a URL change by adding an event listener to our web view. So let's just do that. Okay, so webview.addEventListener did navigate event. What we want to happen when we navigate is we want our URL variable, this one, to hold the new URL of the page that we have navigated to. So To do that, we're just going to equate URL to event.url. And then we want the input field itself to reflect that URL. So let's do that. URL input field dot value equals URL. I think that should do it. Okay, let's Google cute puppies this time. Okay, awesome. We can see there's a change. It's changing. Okay, let's click on this page. The URL reflects the page we're on. We did it. However, we still have a bunch of buttons that do nothing, so let's fix that. Luckily, Electron's web view and web contents come with a lot of methods that will make making these buttons work very, very easy. So let's just add event listeners and get them working. Okay, let's start with the back button, right? So back button dot add event listener, click web view dot go back. All right, now forward button, let's do the same thing, dot add event listener, click, and then same thing, web view dot go forward. Okay, and then reload button, add an event listener on click, web view dot reload. Okay, and now let's see if they work. All right, let's Google something. Let's Google baby wombat. Oh, look at that. Isn't that adorable? Okay, let's just hit back and it works. Our back button works. Okay, let's click on this, go back again, and then go forward. Our forward button works too. Okay, now our reload button seems to work as well. So all of our buttons work except for the add window button, and that's what we will be working on next. So to get our plus button to work and create a new window, we're going to go to the preload file. Let's delete this because we don't need it. And then we're going to import a couple of modules from Electron. We'll import the contextBridge module and ipcRenderer equal require Electron. Let's use contextBridge and expose in main world. We'll just call our API key API. And okay, on new window. Oh, oops, we're gonna call our function new window. And we'll use ipcRenderer to send the message new window. Okay, now let's go back to our Renderer.js file and add an event listener to the new window button. On click, we'll just type in API dot new window. So now when anybody clicks on the plus button, what's gonna happen is this function is going to get triggered. And the message new window will be sent to main.js. In order to get main.js to spin up a new window for us, we first need to import ipcMain. So let's do that. Now let's scroll down and we'll use ipcMain and on new window. New window, create window. Okay, and that should do it. That should get our new window button to work this time. So now let's restart our application. Oh, actually, before we restart our application, how about we hide DevTools as well? To hide DevTools, we should just comment out this line, which is mainWindow.webcontents.openWebTools. And now when we spin up our app again, it should be hidden. PM start. Okay. Now let's see if it's working. Yeah, it is. We can spin up as many windows as we want. I don't like that when we create a new window, we get a black screen. I would like all windows to just open to Google. Okay, so let's go to our Renderer.js file again. And let's add a conditional statement. So if there's no URL specified, if no one inputted anything, let's set our URL to google.com. And let's make sure that our web view goes to google.com as well. So webview.source equals URL. And also let's make our URL input field display the URL will be at, which is Google's URL. So URL input field.value equals URL. Okay, now let's see if it works. Let's spin our app up again. Oh, it opens to Google. Right, new window also opens to Google. And another new window opens to Google. That's awesome. Our app is now pretty much ready. It does everything we want it to do. All our buttons work. One thing though, I'm not really a big fan of leaving the Electron logo as our app's icon. I think it would be much cooler if we add our own custom icon. According to Electron Forge's website for Windows, the recommended format is .ico, which is why I think it would be a good idea to go to a website where you could create favicons, because they usually come in ICO format as well. I like this website, favicon.io, because you can just turn an emoji into a favicon. Last time I chose a bird. This time, how about we just use this alien monster emoji? Just download it. Our icon would be downloaded within a zip archive. So let's extract the contents and drag the favicon and drop it into our source directory. Now let's rename the favicon to just icon.ico, because that would make it simpler. Now let's go back to the createWindow function in the main.js file and add an icon. Now we need to specify where our icon is. So path.join and then their name, icon.ico. If we want our icon to show up also wherever our app shows, like for example on the taskbar or whatever, let's create a public directory where we also keep our icon.ico file. Now we're going to go to our forge.config.js file And this is the file that has configurations regarding the makers of our app, and it has plugin information. For Windows, the build maker is squirrel, which means we actually can just delete these. Let's add the path to our icon. So yeah, public and then /icon.ico. If you're not running Windows, I highly recommend visiting Electron Forge's docs and reading through the requirements. Regardless of the operating system, we should add our icons path to packager.config as well. So let's do this. Icon. And then we can just copy the path and just paste it. And now, the moment of truth. Let's run make. So npm run make. Okay, so doing this is going to package the application for us and create a setup file. Let's hope everything goes as expected. Okay, so right here it says that our artifacts are available in the directory out. So let's find it. Okay. Here it is. Okay. And that's our setup file. Let's double click it. So if you have an antivirus running, like I am right now, your antivirus is probably gonna be suspicious of your application, and that's completely normal. All right, let's test our app. Okay, so we have the icons, we have a desktop shortcut already made for us. Okay, let's try creating a new window. It works. And another one. It works. Awesome. Okay. Now let's Google something. Pika. Aren't pikas adorable? They're lovely little animals. Okay, now let's try the back button. And now the forward button. And now the refresh button. They all work. All right, and now let's click on the search button. And everything works very well. Okay, now let's close our window and try running our application again. All right, guys, so that concludes our tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope your Always On Top browser will bring you so much joy. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. And make sure to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.